we want to take some time to say, who is Doc Lasbury? How is it that God created him? Who was he anyway? And so Pastor Kim Drake, one of his close friends, is going to share a bit of his life. And then Doc's son David is going to come and share a little bit and help us to answer that question, who was Richard Lee Lasbury?
I used to ask him that question in jest quite often. Who are you anyway? I tried to figure it out. It's either 49 or 50 years ago that I first met Dick as a patient. I call him Dick. You may know him as Doc. You may know him as Richard. I've heard him call himself Rich when he was aggravated with himself on the racquetball court, but I'm going to call him Dick, and you'll understand who I'm talking about. But I tried to think about how long ago it was that we met, and it was a great experience. What I really wanted to do was honor him in a way like I've maybe never honored anybody before, because he was that kind of a person to me. I can never stand here and express to you what Dick Lasbury meant to me. We spent hours and hours and hours together, whether it's eating in a restaurant or traveling to an IU game or whatever it's been. And my heart's desire has been to do something that would truly honor him. And it was, I think, 2 or 3 nights ago, in the middle of the night, it became very clear what it was that I needed to do in trying to express my heart toward Dick and for this family and honoring him. So what I've done is I've written what I would call an ode to Dick. An ode is kind of a poem, but it has no cadence, it has no rhythm to it. And that kind of fits me pretty well because I'm kind of freewheeling. So you'll understand this. If you're here as a grammarian or an English teacher, well, don't hold me to this as that wasn't very poetic. Well, it wasn't exactly meant to be. It's meant to express my heart to Dick Lasbury and to his family. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget meeting Dick 49 years ago in a dental chair, and then really meeting him at where else? On a racquetball court where he and my dad introduced me to the game that I and many of us who are here today came to love. I will never forget that very early he invited me to tag along to a regional racquetball tournament at IU. He made it clear from the very beginning that he was going to go down to play one match and come home win or lose. When we arrived, I immediately started watching matches and was enthralled in this new environment, which I'd never encountered before. And then Dick came to me and he said, "Hey," he said, "they've got an opening. You want in?" I had no gear, no shoes, no racket, nothing. And Dick said, "Go get in and I'll buy you all the stuff and you can use one of my rackets." We laughed forever about that event because we both played at pretty much the same time, and I won and he lost. He came to me when his match was over and he said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "I won." He said, "I lost and we're still going home." My friend died October 21st. I will never forget his inimitable ability to greet you with a smile as big as the moon. A great big, "Hey." A handshake that about took your arm off and made you feel like you were a long-lost friend even though you'd seen him just the week before. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget his pride in America and in being an American, and his chagrin when he saw someone unwilling to stand for our national anthem and what he knew to be the greatest nation on earth. I will never forget his pride in having served in the Army and how his disciplines learned there carried over in everything he did. whether it was fixing a tooth, writing an article for the newspaper, studying German, competing at a high level in a number of sports, supporting his children's activities at Taylor, or the challenge and pride of being a husband and father. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget that his blood was not red. If you don't know that, you don't know Dick. His blood was cream and crimson, and it reflected his love, loyalty, and pride for his beloved Indiana Hoosiers. I will never forget his thrill about this time of year, every year, when he would call me and tell me that the basketball tickets had arrived. You would have thought that it was the first year to get season tickets, but he actually held them forever. I will never forget his enthusiasm and zeal and hopes that this might again be the season. I will never forget the privilege of riding to games together, and for me, the biggest and best part of the evening was the ride down and back and the conversation that flowed as freely as a babbling brook. I will never forget a shift when he no longer was comfortable with driving, so he turned that detail over to me. And then the sadness that he simply was no longer able to make the trip at all. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget how he didn't see only what a person was, but what they were becoming and what they could be. He saw potential, possibility, and progress. I testify that I am a beneficiary of his kindness and grace in that realm when I was so often undeserving. I will never forget how he would not waste time focused on people's faults. He didn't waste time talking about those things because in his mind there were far too many greatly important and positive matters to discuss. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget his love for getting together with friends and staying connected with them and his beloved community. I will never forget some of our stretches of time of meeting weekly in restaurants and his love for deep conversation about everything from spiritual matters to history to politics to German to the latest newspaper he was working on and trying it out on me, to his intense and immense knowledge and love for sports, everything from tiddlywinks to last night's basketball game between Guam and Rhode Island. And wanting to know, imagine this, wanting to know if I'd seen that game. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget Dick's interest and love for hearing how other people were doing and their successes. I loved asking him about his wife and children and the pride that seemed to well up in him as he talked about each one of them and what they were doing. I loved hearing about the annual holiday family meal that he and Betty hosted in Indianapolis in a hotel. It was a thrill for him. It was a great delight for him. I loved how he would deflect the tension brought to him because he didn't want anyone making over him. He just simply did what he could, but very quietly and very privately. My friend died October 21st. I will never forget arriving in Florida on the evening of the 18th and receiving a phone call on the morning of the 19th. I lit up when my phone said, Dick Lasbury. That was clearly one of the saddest phone calls I have ever received in my life. For I've only discussed this part with my wife, and that is that Dick was not just a friend to me, but he was, in a very real sense, a kind of a father figure to me. By this time, Dick's voice was very weak as he uttered these words. I just called to say goodbye and to thank you for your friendship. They've told me I'm not going to make it. Even in his last hours, he said some of the most encouraging words to me that I've ever heard from anyone, and he talked of how proud he was of me. Then he finished again through his own tears, saying, I just wanted to say goodbye. And 2 days later, Betty called to let me know that Dick had passed. My friend died October 21st. Or did he? Dick was to me always bigger than life and one of those people that you thought would be around forever. It seems to me that I can still hear his voice and see that moon-sized smile and feel the shake of his hand and hear his upbeat, positive demeanor. And I know I always will, for I will never forget my friend.
I think this is an honor to speak about this great man. It's almost an obligation. And I think I'm probably just going to have to read this because I'm not sure I could get through it any other way. When we convened for the first time after his passing, someone asked my mother how she would describe him. And she thought about it for a moment, and she said one word: unique. And that he was. While she was able to crystallize him in one word, I jotted down an entire catalog. Student, lifelong learner. He gave me several books, one of which had this quote: live as if you will die tomorrow, learn as if you will live forever. And he epitomized that. Self-improver, self-made. Self-made from a hard scrabble beginning. And in fact, I recall my mother saying that he had very few childhood memories and that his family never celebrated Christmas. Which brings me to tough. I crossed paths with Dennis Bensler at a wedding a year and a half ago. And I remember Dennis saying to me, your dad is one tough dude. And he was definitely a fighter. Historian, scholar, especially of his heroes, Churchill, Mandela, Arthur Ashe. And of course, he co-opted the endearing name Woof Woof from a Churchill story. Bibliophile, Anglophile, Germanophile, world traveler, dabbler in the arts and music, multi-sport athlete, boxing enthusiast, and dental mouthguard maker for a 3-time light heavyweight world champion. Patriot, loyal, garrulous, generous, which I heard a ton about earlier today. Philanthropist. And Churchill said, you make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. And by that definition, he lived many lives. And yes, unique. And then I'll throw in stubborn and Luddite, just for a little balance. What could be more unique than at Christmas giving all the kids and grandkids harmonicas, chess sets. One year it was a wad of $2 bills, banjos for everyone, or the year of the unicycles. But he had a penchant for buying in bulk, be it shirts or tens and tens of the same pair of running shoes. Or if you Google dad sneaker, you'll see a picture of his white New Balance 608s or Nike Monarchs. Pedestrian shoes that he was really into way before the current hot trend. And while I'm on his shoes, he at one time would take a black Sharpie pen and label the back of his white shoes with an R and an L for Richard Lasbury. Only the R was on the left shoe and the L was on the right. So anyone seeing that would think, oh, poor guy doesn't know his right from his left. Regarding the duplicate buying, there was a stretch there where every time I saw him, he would give me a pocket-sized booklet of the U.S. Constitution. And I'm still waiting for the moment when someone says, if I only had a portable U.S. Constitution, I could whip them out like a deck of cards. Revisiting my catalog, some of his characteristics that were particularly germane and meaningful and influential in shaping my life include teacher, mentor, supporter, believer, cheerleader, easer of burdens, and provider of opportunity. Regarding these, I'll just share one little vignette that he seemed to enjoy and recounted, but there are so many I could choose from. So in the neighborhood of my childhood home, I had a couple solid friends with whom I would play, and one day one of them, Paul, who was a big guy, and I were playing football, and I heard the dinner bell ring. Yeah, we had a dinner bell. So I'm poised to take my ball and go home, but inexplicably, Paul punts it deep into what we called meatball meadows. Paul had a good leg. Out of principle, I asked him to go get my ball. Then I told him to go get my ball. And then it got physical. Pretty soon I'm on the pavement while Paul is nonchalantly walking home. So I get up and engage him again, and I'm promptly introduced to more pavement. So while I'm becoming Paul's ragdoll, Dad is watching all of this unfold from the front bay window. Much later, he confessed that he was wrestling between his fatherly urge to intervene and the restraint required to allow life to teach its lessons. He chose to teach. Setbacks and overcoming them was one of Dad's repeated mantras. And I think because nothing was ever given to him, this became seared in his mind, and he took every opportunity to impart this wisdom to his children. Moreover, the manner in which you confront the obstacle separates individuals. Nowhere could this principle be more pertinent than in my chosen career, medicine. Every surgical procedure, every medical intervention, every pharmaceutical administration has a known, albeit small, complication rate. It's how you recognize and manage that setback, sometimes in an instant, with everything on the line, that separates a greater from lesser practitioner. Through my dad's instruction, it's quite possible my grasping of his mantra, that is, separating from the men from the boys, had its genesis that day and prepared me for a life in medicine today. But I readily knew then, while limping back to my house after retrieving the ball, that Paul was a man and I was a boy. I recently came across a concept that is applicable today. We're all aware that when you cross-cut a tree, you can observe the rings. And of course, every annual season of growth, the tree lays down a new circumferential ring. What is less well known is that the oldest rings of the tree at the central core are no longer living. This non-viable core is called the heartwood of the tree. And though it's no longer living, it serves a vital purpose. It provides a nurturing scaffold of strength and support for the surrounding living elements. So hopefully the metaphor is abundantly clear. Though we may lose someone, they remain an integral part of our lives. They provide support and strength, and when we reflect upon their life's events, they continue to teach and guide. Dad, you are now part of my heartwood. In keeping with this theme of enduring presence, I'd like to read some words shared by my grandmother, Mary Louise Converse, upon the passing of her husband, my grandfather, Roy Converse. October 1975. When the sun goes below the horizon, it is not set. The heavens glow for a full hour after its departure. And when a great and good man sets, the sky is luminous long after he is out of sight. When he goes, he leaves behind him much of himself. So let me just finish by saying, Dad, you don't need the earthly struggles and yearning for unceasing personal growth anymore, because you've made it. And you don't need to live out a Churchill speech and never give up, because you've won. And you don't need to yell out, woof woof, anymore when you arrive, because you're home. And you don't need to recite Invictus, nor be the captain of your soul, because the one true almighty captain is commanding your soul now. It's time to rest. Unlace the running shoes, put down the pen, and close the book. As Greg said at the interment ceremony, be still. I want to thank you for being my dad, for being unique, and we'll all see you again in due time. Love you.